This is my most prized possession. This is what they give you when you finish the Tour de France. A little medal, not very spectacular, but would have pride of place in anything I've ever won from the game. It means I achieved something I dreamt about as a kid, you know. Not totally, because I never dreamt of finishing it as a kid. I dreamt of winning it. But it's enough, you know, given how hard it was to actually get there, how hard it was to make the start of it. It's enough that I did get there and that I did actually get through it. That's what makes it so special.
Is taking on the yellow, takes on the green jersey of Eric van der Ord. So Le Monde is looking now to finish this tour on the highest possible note.
Only the best 200 professionals get to ride a race. So just to get to that level, you've got to be pretty good. The general public don't really appreciate that. I say, well, where did you finish? You know, 132nd doesn't actually register as a great result for them. But I know, to me, it's everything, you know.
It's been harder than I ever expected, but this last week has been unbelievable. I go on the bike every day, not knowing if I could finish or not.
Will you do it again next year?
Certainly. It's crazy, but I will.
Paul, many congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest. He gained his hard man's licence in the Tour of France. 2 years later, he just gave up. Couldn't take it anymore. Forget it. Resigned, came back. Mind you, another avenue open to him because he became the Journalist of the Year last year. And now he's written the story of his life in a book called A Rough Ride. You have spat in the soup. A vulgar French expression means you spilled the beans, you've let the cat out of the bag, you've given the game away, you've a turncoat. And you talk about the drugs in the cycling scene.
Right.
And the implication is that most of them are at it. Most of the time.
I'm not concerned about implications. That's not why I wrote the book. Why I wrote the book was not to say this guy's taking drugs or this guy's taking drugs. It's to highlight the problems that there are.
Would have been the easiest thing in the world for me, just to say, OK, journalists now, forget all that, get on with it now. Don't write any book, don't tell any stories. But I had a duty, because I love the sport, I had a duty. This is wrong, that you cannot compete at this sport without arriving at that crossroads that I arrived at. That's what it was all about. It was about what the authorities needed to do to address it. That was the reason I did it. And naively, I thought, wow, you're going to write this and people are going to be saying, well done, mate. You've done the sport a great service. That's how naive I was then. I had absolutely no idea it would be as bad as it was. You know. You're like dog shite on someone's foot. And that was the sense of being dog shite, you know. It was the unvarnished truth about professional cycling. I guess the difficulty for a lot of my teammates was that they were still competing at the time. They hadn't retired like I had, and they were getting asked questions they hadn't been asked before. So there were implications to my friends that maybe even I hadn't thought about before I'd written it.
How can Paul be doing this? Like, you don't write books about what you've seen on the inside of our sport. This is the first time anybody's done this kind of book about the sport. I felt like he was kind of blowing out of context his experience with cheating, that because he did it, everyone was doing it.
He was viewed as a guy who, you know, sold out cycling for his own benefit. That's how he was viewed in the world of cycling. He was viewed as a skeptic that could never be convinced otherwise. I still view that in cycling he's not welcomed warmly.
The reaction of the sport was to say, you know what, he's just a small rider. He never won anything. You know, why should we care about him? And it was a tremendous work for cycling, on cycling's behalf. And the sad part is that cycling rejected it. When if they had embraced it, looked at it, acted upon it, there would have been no Lance Armstrong. There would have been no the Armstrong years.
What was hardest of all was listening to this shit about him being a failed cyclist, because this was the first thing that was thrown on him. He's bitter. He's bitter about cycling. I remember him when he was younger, he had a very vibrant sense of humour. I don't think he has a very vibrant sense of humour anymore. He's certainly quite a serious individual now.
I don't think I actually told you that was what I was doing today until it was done.
No, you didn't know.
No. You were reading it the first time yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which wouldn't have been too easy. Was it? I don't know.
I didn't, it's just the way it was your story and that's the way it was and I accepted it.
Yeah.
But most of the cycling fraternity over here didn't accept it. I'd say probably 99% of them just resented the book coming out. And they were saying I was somebody that didn't make the grade, I was moaning about it. And that probably annoyed me more than anything. Me personally, I wouldn't have gone down that road myself. Thank you for an easy life.
Don't believe that. Don't believe that at all. I didn't lick it off the ground. My dad was a terrific amateur racer and was the national champion, Irish champion in the year I was born. We're 4 boys, I was the eldest, and you know, from the moment I could walk I was watching my dad race, and from the moment I could talk it was the one thing I told him I wanted to do. I wanted to be a bike racer. So much of my drive and my focus, my ambition to be a pro, was wanting to please my father. That's where a lot of it came from, just wanting to show Dad, you know, I can do this, I want to please you.
Paul was born perfect in an imperfect world.
That is hilarious.
In this group are 3 Irish riders, Stephen Roach, Sean Kelly, and a great ride being done too by Paul Kimmage. So
It used to be the Fab Four, the 4 Irish professional riders of the late 80s. Martin Early, myself, Sean Kelly, and Stephen Roach. Kelly was a giant. He was the world #1 for 5 years in a row, from 1984 to 1989, and is now a leading commentator on the sport. Stephen was also world class, the only Irishman ever to win the Tour de France.
It was Phil Anderson of Van Poppel who shared it, and 2 arms in the air for Stephen Roach said it all. This has been a great finish to an unbelievable Tour de France.
I met Stephen when I was 13. We used to go out every Sunday together, or spend the weekends youth hustling. It was great, a lovely, innocent time. Stephen was someone I'd idolised from the day I started riding. And in my last year as a pro, we were teammates and roommates again, and it was like we were back youth hustling. We were very close. Fortunately, when Rough Ride came out and Stephen reacted in the way that he did about it, I removed him from the Wall of Fame. I stuck him in the corner here, and he's buried under a pile of shit, which is apt in some ways, given what happened to our relationship. I just stuck it there for the time being. I think he's still kind of in a purgatory. I'm not sure whether he'll ascend to the wall or be sent to hell for forever. I don't know. It's a long time since I've spoken to Stephen. So that's kind of sad, you know. That's kind of sad.
Many times it's difficult for former athletes to be critical of a sport they love, of people that they perhaps were involved with professionally in that sport. Paul came at it from the outsiders or the Mavericks perspective. He had already written, you know, an iconoclastic book. And so he had kind of burned whatever bridges there were in that sense. And that liberated him, I think, to be a conscience, a voice, and to be very aggressive.
And finally, the last thing I'll say for the people that don't believe in cycling, the cynics and the skeptics, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry you can't dream big, and I'm sorry you don't believe in miracles. I'm a fan of the Tour de France for as long as I live, and there are no secrets. This is a hard sporting event, and hard work wins it. So, vive le Tour, forever. Thank you.
Lance, you've spoken recently about the return of Evan Basso and Floyd Landis after their suspensions. What is it about these dopers that you seem to admire so much?
Excuse me? What is your name again?
My name is Paul Kimmage. I work for the Sunday Times. I asked for an interview, but I didn't get one.
Right, and just as a little preface, I might just clear up one thing. The reason you didn't get it, Paul, I wanted to make sure that was you because I don't know what you look like. When I decided to come back, for what I think is a very noble reason, you said, folks, the cancer has been in remission for 4 years, but our cancer has now returned, meaning me. So I think it goes without saying, no, we're not going to sit down and do an interview. You are not worth the chair that you're sitting on with a statement like that, with a disease that touches everybody around the world. Now, to answer your question.
I like the fact that the message I was sending him was, you know, you think you're untouchable, you think there are people out there who aren't prepared to stand up to you. Well, think again.
As a society, are we supposed to forgive and forget and let people get back to their job? Absolutely. I'm not sure I will ever forgive you for that statement. And I'm not sure that anybody around the world that has been affected by this disease will forgive you.
You don't have a patent on cancer, by the way. No, I've lost people with cancer. I'm interested in the cancer of doping in cycling.
Right.
That's been my life's work. I raced as a professional. I exposed it.
Alan?
Then you come along and it disappears. The problem disappears.
Libels or libel suits are the Oscars of our trade. Unless you're getting them, you're not doing your job right. But when you do get them, it's not a nice moment. It's a pretty heart-stopping and shocking moment. There's legal proceedings being taken against me by the World Cycling Governing Body, UCI. I'm not going to pretend I actually like any of these people who are coming after me. Theodore Roosevelt, the former president of the governing body, was the president of the governing body at a time when Rough Ride was published. And of course the other person, the president, Pat McQuaid, he was the team manager when I rode the Olympics in 1984 for Ireland. We go back a long way. I'm after finishing 6th in the World Championships in 1985, and this is the man who's suing me now, who was my team manager that day. They're bringing me to court for an interview I gave to L'Equipe during the Tour de France of 2011, and for an interview I did with Floyd Landis when I was at the Sunday Times. Floyd was a Tour de France winner. He was stripped of his title, the first rider in the history of the Tour de France who loses his title for doping, which is a laugh in itself, given how many of them have doped over the years.
As Landis gets off his bike like he's about to deliver the newspaper.
When you say that, you can justify it in the sense that you weren't cheating anybody else, but you were cheating some people. There were riders in that tour who rode the first tour.
That's right.
Who weren't. So what about your attitude towards those, or are they not on the radar? How do you deal with that?
Here's the facts. Somebody's going to cheat those guys. So it's either going to be me getting cheated, or I'm going to be the one cheating them. There's no good scenario. And I'd rather not be the guy getting cheated. I may have actually said, if I wait long enough, this might get fixed and I'll have a chance to win it without doing this, and I'd rather do that. Yeah. But there was no scenario in my mind where in my lifetime I was going to get a chance to race the tour and win clean.
I actually came away from that interview thinking, oh my God, this is never getting fixed. This is never getting fixed.
I take responsibility for doing it. I made these decisions. I don't point fingers, no one forced me to do it. But the circumstances were such that the decision was almost made for me.
Paul is far from the only journalist who has written about the UCI in a critical manner. So the fact that Paul was sued and the fact that he was sued personally as opposed to his employer being sued was clearly punitive.
Hell will freeze over before I apologise to Theodore Roosevelt or Pat McQuaid. To be forced to kneel, which is what it is for me. That's what it is. That's what the apology is. Kneel down there, boy, and you say you're sorry. Because I'm not sorry. I'm absolutely not sorry, and I will not say that I'm sorry. So that I would be betraying myself if I did that. And whatever about that, I also know I cannot hurt Anne and the kids. That's the bottom line. I cannot hurt Anne and the kids.
You're obsessing with this. The case is in the hands of a solicitor. There's nothing you can do there. You just need to put your head down and get on with your life until we know where we stand with the case. That would be my only problem, that you get so...
And the difference is that it's an emotional attachment for me. I cannot be dispassionate about drugs in sport because of the way it affected me in my previous life as a professional athlete. I cannot be dispassionate about it. I can't. Other journalists can address it and do a great job. I can't do that. I can't be dispassionate about it. It's an emotional thing with me, and that's where the problems start. Our profession is supposed to be about standing up for truth, the pursuit of truth, and you can't abandon that when it becomes uncomfortable.
This is a landmark day for cycling. Cycling indeed has endured a lot of pain as it has absorbed the impact of the USADA report. The UCI will ban Lance Armstrong from cycling, and the UCI will strip him of his 7 Tour de France titles. Lance Armstrong has no place in cycling.
Pat, I'm just wondering if you'd comment on the journalist Paul Kimmage, whether you're planning to continue legal action against him before the end of the year.
The case against Paul Kimmage is nothing to do with Lance Armstrong, nothing to do with Paul Kimmage as an anti-doping advocate, nothing to do with Paul Kimmage, who wrote the book The Rough Ride. This is about a journalist who accused me and my predecessor and the UCI of being corrupt, and it's a straightforward defamation case.
Can we just try to be as careful as possible, not to exacerbate your situation and not to land me in one as well, if you don't mind, okay? And so, as you heard there on the sports headlines, Lance Armstrong has been stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles. 2 men have done more work than anybody else in exposing Lance Armstrong for what he is, David Walsh and Paul Kimmage. Paul Kimmage is with us, and I think we should say to start, Paul, you're still the subject, I think, of legal action been taken against you by Pat McQuaid and the UCI for your calling of things straightly over the last number of years.
He'd probably argue about me calling it straightly, but yes.
You've done so with a passion. I think this is something that perhaps we need to address first, is that there's been no malice on your part towards anyone. You've actually just had a passionate interest in trying to expose the truth about what goes on in cycling.
Yeah, and I sometimes let myself down in that every time I speak, it's from the heart. It's because I believe it's of fundamental importance. So yeah, I suppose, but again, sometimes I let myself down in the way I do that.
All right, let's go through some of the things that Pat McQuaid had to say.
Had you been hoping today, Paul, that he would say, I'm dropping this lawsuit?
Yes, if I'm honest, yes. If I'm honest, because this is an absolute pain for me at this time.
In terms of the effect on your life as well as that ongoing case, you feel you lost your job because of this story?
Yes, I honestly believe that this story cost me my job. But I am hopeful it may bizarrely result in me getting another job. I'm hopeful of that. Because I am a journalist and I do want to continue this work. In January of 2012, I was made redundant after 10 years at the Sunday Times. I went from a position of thinking I was king of the world and bulletproof to walking down to the local unemployment office. And 2 weeks later I was hit with the lawsuit. They were suing me and not the newspaper. I just didn't see it coming.
The public response to Paul's situation was absolutely uplifting. The funds started pouring in. This is a journalist being sued by a sports organisation, and you have ordinary members of the public with $5 and $10 and $2, and it adds up to $100,000 of support for just an ordinary journalist. But of course, the truth is, he's not an ordinary journalist.
Fucking hell. UCI suspends legal action against you. Fucking hell. That was the pressure came on. There's a bit of me thinking, fucking hell, just fucking let it go now. Just get out of here. Get on with your fucking life, you know? Oh. The Tour de France has always been and will always be the biggest event in cycling. But this year it's bigger. It's the 100th edition of the race and the first since the fall of Armstrong. Will it be the first time when we haven't asked questions about performance-enhancing drugs? I'm not sure, but I'm anxious to find out. I sat at home last year, watching it on TV, and now I've been given the chance to come back and cover it for the Sunday Independent. I'm looking forward to writing some pieces and doing video blogs that will allow me to observe and capture a sense of where cycling is now. I'm Paul Kimmage. That big blue thing behind me is the Mediterranean Sea, and the rock we're heading for is called Corsica, for the 100th edition of the Tour de France.
Hold on, I don't think this is going.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I don't even know how to work this fucking camera.
He said swipe it that way.
I haven't got a clue.
We are a good team. We are.
Well, yeah, we are normally a good team, but we haven't done this before.
Yeah, well, it takes getting used to.
Yeah.
Plus, I can't see you. I can't see your face when I'm doing this.
You know what I look. You know what I look like.
No, but I can be able to see you.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, you just need to get a bit better. You know, I can't be standing around all day doing 55 takes.
I'll try my best to improve.
Okay, right, okay. We've been married for
25 and a half years.
25 and a half years, so it's obviously working pretty good so far. Hopefully it'll survive the next month, which is not a given. Which is not a given at all. very interesting juncture at the moment because we've been here once before after a major doping scandal in 1998. That was a chance for the sport to start again and address the problems of the past. But unfortunately, the first champion of the new era was Lance Armstrong. Unless lessons are learned about what went wrong last time, we're going to be standing here in another 10 to 12 years in exactly the same position, coming off the back of another major scandal, wondering, are we ever going to be able to sort this out?
This really is the what's next race. There'll be a lot of attention on the younger generation. You know, are they really different? Do they have a chance to compete in a different way and not be subject to the same pressures as the older cyclists? And all those are open questions. So I think if there was one race, one Tour de France, one cycling race that really demands and transcends the sport in terms of how we should look at doping in an elite sport, this is the one.
Last year, the Tour de France was dominated by Team Sky, with Bradley Wiggins becoming the first British rider to win the race. With Wiggins pulling out of this year's Tour, Sky will now be led by last year's runner-up, Chris Froome. He is the clear favourite for this year's Tour. I've never spoken to Chris Froome. It's probably the first time I've arrived at the race and not spoken to the favourite or had any contact with him or any real sense of where he's come from.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously it's a great privilege and a great pleasure for us to be here at the start of the Team Tour de France. I think the selection this year has been very, very difficult for us, given the strength and depth of the team. The team is made up out of riders at different stages of their careers, and one of the things that we tried to do with Team Sky was we very much set out to take riders that could then develop within the team, rather than just going out and buying ready-made riders, if you like. I think the way that the season's gone so far for us, we can come to the start here with great confidence.
Bonjour à tous. Jour de fête comme disait Jacques Tati, c'est-à-dire lancement, première étape du 100e Tour de France. Nous sommes à Porto Vecchio, nous sommes dans l'île de beauté, et c'est un Tour de beauté que l'on espère, ce 100e Tour de France.
Everything about this race for me is the quality of my work. If I can work well and write some good pieces, I will enjoy it. But if I don't do something decent tonight, and I don't write something decent next week or the week after, then it will not be enjoyable for me at all. So everything will come down to the quality of what I write.
Oh chute, terrible chute dans le peloton, oh là là,
You know, I could sit down and rattle off, you know, a lot of shite about the race and who's going to win and make life really easy for myself. But who wants to read that, you know?
Yeah, it is going to be on the line. Marcel Kittel gets the victory.
Over the next 3 weeks, we follow the race. We are part of the media circus. That's how it works. It will be a week before we get to the mountains and the first real test.
First place. It's almost a repeat of that first.
Before that, it's chatterboxing from Corsica to the Pyrenees and a chance to wear the leader's yellow jersey. This is the first I'm going to see a racer actually race since we left Corsica. I mean, normally we're at the finish where we see them come like that, or at the start where we see them going like that. So it'll be novel to be inside the ropes for once. Yeah. There's still some little boy in me that wants to see the races coming through. What we've seen now is a 4 or 5 man breakaway, and then the bunch coming through. Now for those 4 or 5 guys, just the fact that they're out front and they've got the helicopter overhead and the people by the side are all clapping, that's the dream that every kid has who races a bike, that one day they're going to be in with a chance of racing through a tour stage win. And
And for me, it was the greatest moment of my life as a pro bike rider when it happened to me in the Tour de France, because we did actually get to the end. We were sprinting it out for the win.
Goes to rotate to Paul Kimmage now. Kimmage is sat at the back of this group for the best part of 30 kilometres. He's now number 2 in line. Paul Kimmage there in second place.
I had one chance with some big hitters, some really top riders, and to be with those in the mix was the fulfilment of every dream I'd ever had as a kid.
And Peters goes across the Blanco's wheel. De Croo swings off. He's made the pace now. He's up to his teammate Peters to try and take it over at the top now. And Durand comes in the middle. Where is Paul Kimmage? He still has a chance. Is he being swept away? As Jesus Blanco.
I imagine my parents at home, you know, watching it, and the thrill it must have been for them to see their son in the middle of all this excitement.
On the front, Vinny trying on the left of Peters. Takes third. Peters is there. Peters gets it. Vinny is third. And Durand is fourth.
And I think I actually book it. Dropped my head crossing the line. Knew I'd blown it. Didn't think it was the last chance I'd ever have, but you know, knew I'd blown that one anyway. I had a brainwave yesterday in terms of, you know, nailing down where I want to write this week. I like the hand that comes out of the grave in Kerry. You've got a lot of former champions who previously would have escaped the doping question, but are being drawn back into it now. The example being Laurent Jalabert, who came here as the lead analyst for France 2, the national television station that covered the race, and has been caught now because of some frozen samples in 1998 that have been retroactively tested, and that showed that he was using EPO back then. And this is someone that always denied that he had doped before.
Vous avez été cycliste de 89 à 2002. C'était une période particulière, semble-t-il, en ce qui concerne l'utilisation notamment de l'EPO. Donc, je voudrais vous demander de manière très franche quelles ont été vos relations avec le dopage pendant toutes ces périodes-là, toutes ces années 90.
Ce que je peux vous assurer, c'est qu'à aucun moment, je n'ai cherché, par quelque manière que ce soit, à rencontrer des médecins, à rencontrer qui que ce soit pour essayer d'améliorer mes performances.
There's an ongoing Senate hearing now about that 98 tour that's going to bring out some other names. So focus on my piece this week is going to be on the difficulty for riders like Jalabert in confessing when they've denied it for so long.
Listen, this was, in this sport, an endemic sociological problem. And there's no way around it. And what we want to do is to prevent that from happening again. And we think that the best route forward is to have a Truth and Reconciliation Committee and to get the knowledge out in the open, learn from it, move forward. Having it come out in little dribs and drabs, you know, Laurent Jalabert this week, this guy that week, is ridiculous and painful and unnecessary. I just think it's a bit sad when you see a situation like Laurent Jalabert and, you know, you can just see that he's scared to just say it, get on with it, and then move forward. David?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just an inevitability to it all. I think, as Jonathan said, the problem at the moment is it's micro events, it's individuals that are going through their individual truth and reconciliation. If we let it just happen organically and the way it's been happening, it will just never stop. It's just going to trickle out for decades and decades. And you look at somebody like Laurent Jalabert, who's not a stupid man. He's intelligent, and yet he finds himself in a situation where he's acting like a scared little boy.
What can you do to influence that? Because obviously it's impacting on your careers now. And what can you do as a team to actually influence the UCI to do what it needs to do to make sure there is this TNR?
From my perspective, I've been banging on the door on that for years. We did it. I did it.
How many other teams are banging on the door for this to happen like you are?
I have no idea.
And why isn't that? Why aren't you united in that? Because it seems like a no-brainer for the sport that it has to happen.
So we're not very united in much, Paul, unfortunately.
Doping for many, 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 many years had become an accepted practice as part of the business, part of the job. And to talk about it was seen as only disparaging the sport publicly, disparaging the sponsors publicly. Why would you ruin your job? Why would you ruin the jobs of your teammates? Why would you do that? That's unethical.
Thank you very much for coming.
The problem is that it's twisted. It's twisted by the fact that you're protecting something that fundamentally shouldn't be there in the first place and fundamentally violates every law of fairness that there ever was. So, but that's a hard thing to deal with. And I feel like a lot of people who keep omerta really believe that it's the right thing to do. That they're thinking, well, the right thing to do is to stay quiet about this.
For a lot of the riders here, this is just another stage and just another town. For me, it's a little different. They will have a day when they will ride their last stage of the tour, and they will remember where that was and what that meant to them at the time. My last day as a Tour de France rider was here in Montpellier.
Remember today that Paul Kimmage went out of the Tour. Kimmage out of the Tour before the Alps and after the Pyrenees. Paul Kimmage retires from the race apparently with low morale, and the general feeling amongst all of the followers on the Tour is that he may well retire from cycling as well.
I do regret that I didn't go to Paris. That would have been the fairy tale ending, to go on and finish in Paris and get another Tour medal. And if I had a chance, another shot at it again, I probably would. I don't think I would have climbed off when I did.
I was actually already at that stage in '89 more successful as a rider than I was as a bike rider. I was getting a lot more praise for my writing than I was riding the bike. So it was very exciting to be able to leave that behind and move on and step into what looked like a very exciting career.
I remember the Tour of Italy in 1989, going into the press room after the team time trial and being very excited that this is a place I was going to be working the year after. Very excited, thinking it was a great place, thinking that all these people were going to be my colleagues. But some of them were. A lot of them I still respect. A lot of them I don't respect at all. I see them running around in groups of 4 and 5 together, and that's classic journalist pack. They like to hunt in packs. I prefer to be my own man, to work on my own, to form my own opinions, and to stand or fall by those opinions. Whereas I feel a lot of the guys here, they need reassurance. They need someone holding their hand. They need someone saying, yeah, I agree with you, you're right. And I have no respect for that. The brotherhood would have it that you don't criticise a colleague. It's fine to go kicking the crap out of some athlete for not doing their job, but you don't do it to your own. That's possibly an unwritten rule, and one I've never subscribed to as well. And I have had issue with several colleagues in the past over that, you know. I've had a go at them publicly over their behaviour and what they've written, and it hasn't endeared me to the fraternity.
I think most people in here would respect Paul for some of the work he's done. I think some people would probably not take kindly to being criticised as a group, as journalists have been. I think the accusation that he makes of some of us, and I think of me, but not directly, is that we are in some way compromised and that we're scared to ask hard questions. He was unhappy at the job the British press were doing in reporting the Tour last year and Bradley Wiggins' success. I hugely resent his accusation that he makes in public without knowing that we don't ask hard questions. It's all we ask.
I'm sure there's a lot of them think I'm a right pain in the ass, self-righteous prick, but that's their call.
I changed the slant on it from a piece about Jalabert and the fact that he was outed, if you want, for past doping this week. It changed in that Sean Kelly has just written an autobiography, and again it was a great opportunity for Kelly to set the record straight about doping and cycling and his experiences of it, and he didn't take that opportunity. He's tested positive twice in his career. Anytime doping has come up over the last 10-15 years, Kelly just goes silent and has never spoken about it. And you don't help the sport by being silent on doping. What the sport needs now is for people to talk up, for icons like Kelly to talk up about, listen, this is what it was like when I came into it. This is how the problem has got as bad as it is today, because it suits Kelly and it suits Jalabert and people like that, that people have this impression that doping started and will end with Lance Armstrong.
We're 8 days into the tour and we're at Axe to the Main for the first mountain stage. This is where things get interesting. The big boys come out to play.
The tempo that is being set on the front of this group by Team Sky is putting everybody into serious amounts of difficulty. Now you can see the acceleration. Port is dragging Froome away from Alberto Contador, Roman Kreuziger, and also they're pulling away from Alejandro Valverde.
Right, so arrêtez là. Arrêtez.
As we see the acceleration coming from Chris Froome, now the hammer is down. He has been team for this first move of the Tour de France. He's been sitting in that pack for the first 7 days of the race, waiting for the mountains to arrive.
Qui est un petit peu moins difficile, on est dans un léger replat pour le Britannique qui va pouvoir récupérer, mais non, il se met debout sur sa selle, il se met debout en danseuse Christopher Froome pour relancer en palais, mais non, il se met debout sur sa selle, il se met debout en danseuse Christopher Froome pour relancer en position de contre-la-montre désormais, les deux poignées sur...
This is going to be a stage win and a yellow jersey for Chris Froome. He has now put himself head and shoulders above the rest of the riders in this year's Tour de France.
Yeah, it's been a pretty emphatic win. But you look how easy it was from just on a different level to everybody else.
Il n'y a rien qui soit comparable à avoir le maillot leader dans le Tour de France.
Chris, I had flashbacks today of US postal days because first day in the mountains, and as Marc Madiot said today, it looks like the last rites have been read on this race, that you've killed it right from the very beginning. Can you tell us, please, that everything we've seen today is totally bona fide? We're not going to be regretting this day in 20 years' time.
100%, 100%. It's normal that people ask questions, given the history of the sport. That's an unfortunate position we find ourselves in at the moment, that eyebrows are going to be raised, questions are going to be asked about our performances. For me, I mean, yeah, it is a bit of a personal mission to show that the sport has changed. I certainly know that the results I'm getting, they're not going to be strict. 10, 20 years down the line, I'm rest assured that's not going to happen.
C'est une question que...
Chris, I just want you to know that my intention is not to going on your parade, okay?
100%. No, 100%.
I had to ask that question.
No, it's good.
Not enough
I want
of
to
the
talk about it.
asked that question before. I was here, last time I came here was in those days. So.
No, it's something that needs to be talked about, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, all right.
Glisse un mot sur le maillot jaune.
I can't help reacting to what I see. I mean, there's a piece in this morning from David Miller, who I like, and he's given out about all the people asking questions about Froome. Now, I've said this to David before. He loves cycling, but his love is blind. My love is not blind, okay? I'm not going to apologise to David Miller or to anyone for reacting the way I do to what I see. And it's unfortunate, but that's what the sport has become now. We've been betrayed and lied to for so long that we actually cannot believe our own eyes.
He seems nice. He's more gracious than his teammate was last year in the same position.
Nice has nothing to do with it. Not a popularity contest.
No, but maybe he's a really nice fellow.
Yeah. Well, he's very polite. And I don't know him. I don't know.
He's dealing with it pretty well, the controversy, isn't it?
Let's see.
Sorry for interrupting your show. I think he's nice.
When Sky were established, they promised all sorts of things about how they were going to conduct their business. And one thing they said was that they would only employ British doctors who'd never worked in cycling before. Geert Linders is a Belgian doctor who's been involved in doping riders with other teams. He was their doctor for 2 years, and they got rid of him after Wiggins won last year's Tour. So I'm a bit unsure. I'm a bit sceptical.
I can have my glasses, please. Don't do Hispano around these. Did you not bring them? Okay.
But I think if you'd have told us that we would be sitting here today with the time gaps that we've got, with the time trials coming up, ready to go into the rest of the race, I think we'd have taken it. So that's pretty much my summary, I guess.
Another question here, please.
Hi, Chris. Bradley Wiggins is on record as saying that the association with Geert Linders last year was a good thing, that he is a good thing to be associated with cycling. What is your position on that? And how angry do you feel? There's a lot of the scepticism about your team is built on that association with Linders last year.
Association with Lenders. I personally didn't have much contact with Lenders, so I can't really comment. But naturally, people are going to ask questions whenever, given the history, whenever there are great performances, they have been linked to doping in the past. So naturally now we're bearing the brunt of a lot of those questions. But personally, I feel the sport has moved on. I know what I'm doing is right. I know how I've got ready for this Tour de France. I know the stage I won 2 days ago. I know that result will never be stripped. Outside of that, I don't know what else I can do to...
I think, Paul, that the reality is that the whole Linders thing is my responsibility, and I'll take that squarely on his chin. And I think if anybody should be asked that question, it should be me, really. And, you know, it's something I regret. It's a mistake I made. I think I've held my hand up and recognised that mistake. You know, somebody looks you in the eye and they lie to you. I'm pretty angry about it, quite frankly. You know, I think that decision by myself and the rest of the management staff has put Chris in a position where he has to answer questions like you've just asked him. But that's not his fault, to be fair. That's my fault, really, isn't it? You know?
Any more questions?
Allez, voilà, je m'arrête ici. Allez, 10 secondes, on va suivre le tir français avec les magazines et la presse. Allez, dernier souvenir, et personne qui a loupé la caravane. Allez-y, profitez-en, c'est Nico aujourd'hui. À l'arrière des véhicules. Allez, vite, faites-vous plaisir. C'est Nico aujourd'hui, à l'arrière des véhicules.
Just get a little bag out of the drawer, will you?
Where's the silver bag?
In the cutlery drawer.
I'm no expert, but a man who is Paul Kimmage, cycling journalist and author and former Tour de France. Chris Froome just managed to quietly maintain his position as overall leader, right?
Obviously, the weekend was massive. Froome took the jersey on Saturday, had a very, very difficult day on Sunday in defending it. He has defended it. Today is a really big day in the race. Today is the first individual time trial, and it's an opportunity for Froome to increase his lead on his nearest rivals, and I expect him to do that. But after that, he will not really be tested again until Sunday when the race goes up, Mont Ventoux, and from next Sunday for the last week of the race, it'll be massive. The last week of the race is absolutely massive.
Paul, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks ever so much for your time.
Thanks, lads. Froome is unlike any rider I've ever seen. It's just the way he sits on the bike. He's like one of those Stephen Lowry paintings, matchstick man. I don't know, I think he's naturally skinny.
He's lean though, isn't he?
He's lean, yeah, but he's big, he's tall as well. He's considerably faster than the other climbers that he's fighting with to win the race overall. I mean, you look at the gaps now, he's beaten all of his major rivals by at least 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Well, we've been on this race for 2 weeks now, and I don't know what to believe. Can I believe in Froome? I don't know. At what stage, given how often we've been betrayed, can you start believing again? What stage can we make that leap of faith? Can you just jump blindly in and say, this guy is clean? I can't make that leap of faith yet. It's an absolute head-wrecker. It could be this is the greatest cycling display we've ever seen, and we just don't know it. We don't know it. And that's the tragedy of it now, you know, where we are now, what's happened before. We don't know, I don't know. I absolutely don't know.
Attention de Christopher Froome, attaque de Froome, réponse d'Alberto Contador.
Mais regardez cette attaque assis sur la selle, c'est incroyable d'attaquer dans le Ventoux comme ça, assis sur la selle, on a l'impression qu'il est sur le
rejoint. Regardez Christopher Froome.
On n'a jamais vu ça, c'est un festival. Sur les pentes du Ventoux, lui qui découvre les gens de Provence en compétition.
Attaque à la canchera sur Christopher Froome.
Non, mais les a lâchés, ouais.
Attaque à la canchera, Thierry. Ah, je l'ai vu.
Il fait 5 km à monter, là.
Michael qui ramène Alberto Contador.
Ça va, on va être enregistré, nous. Hein.
Attaque assis sur la selle.
Les reporters.
Chris Froome has toppled all of the men of the Tour de France today and increases his overall lead tonight.
Almost immediately after this stage, people were casting doubt over Chris's performances on Ventoux. Can you provide me with your most compelling reason why we should believe not just Chris, but every single member of your team?
You're asking me how can I prove to you that we're not doping, basically. Okay, well, you're all asking the same questions, obviously, and we rack our brains every day. We see each other in the morning in front of the bus, we see each other at night after the stage, as we go into the bus, and every day we get asked the same question. And I can assure you we're thinking very, very hard about the optimal way of proving to you guys that we're not doping.
I just think it's quite sad that we're sitting here the day after the biggest victory of my life yesterday, quite a historic win, talking about doping. And quite frankly, I mean, my teammates and I, we've slept on volcanoes to get ready for this. We've been away from home for months, training together, just working our asses off to get here. And here I am basically being accused of being a cheat and a liar. And that's not cool.
I'm in a position where I've had this chance to travel with Sky since the beginning of the year. I've had lots and lots of conversations about doping with Dave Brailsford and with riders like Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome. Let's put it like this, I have less scepticism now about the team than I had when I first started living with them. I've spent about 7 weeks with them. I'm not saying that Sky are clean, I'm saying I've less scepticism now than I had at the beginning, and I think there's a very good chance they are clean.
Yeah, face there. And there. Yeah, there. And the other side as well.
Mont Ventoux, le géant de Provence, is remembered for the death of Tom Simpson.
Dans ce virage, à la sortie de ce virage, que le 13 juillet 1967, Tom Simpson trouvait la mort sur les pentes du Ventoux. Oui, c'est ici même.
Dans une atmosphère étouffante, à 2 km du sommet, un homme zigzague sur la route. Ce coureur, c'est l'anglais Tom Simpson.
Tom Simpson was a victim of the doping culture at the time. And that was July 1967. And that should have been the end of it. Amphetamines in his back pocket. Pushed him over the limit. He's eulogised, and I'm not sure that's right. That makes me a bit angry because there have been plenty of other young kids who've died as a result of that same doping culture, and they don't have monuments on the side of mountains. Nobody remembers them. And it's wrong. It's just not right. It's wrong that should have happened. And I would like to drag those who've been responsible and bring them up here and ask them to explain that. I actually wouldn't bring them here. No, that'd be wrong. I wouldn't bring them here. Where I would bring them would be a small little graveyard in Holland to the gravestone of Johannes Streuer, a young Dutch kid who I raced with in 1986 and as a professional in 1989. He's on the cover of Rough Ride with me, a white jersey. And a year later, he's at home in Holland and his girlfriend wakes up in the middle of the night and he's stone cold in the bed beside her. And there were a spate of those deaths in the 90s that were EPO related or rumoured to be EPO related. And this is this super drug that came in to the sport in the 90s that thickened your blood, increased your oxygen capacity, and also turned your blood to treacle when you were at night. And we had 20-odd cyclists who died in the 90s as a result of this. And they're not remembered other than the people
who are close to them, other than their families. And you think, what utter fucking madness. What utter fucking madness. And it wasn't like they were doing that on their own. They had managers and soigneurs and masters who were facilitating that, who were actually watching them doing it, and who thought it was okay. You know, it was fine for them to, this is madness. None of them stepped in and said, look, this is bullshit. We're not having this. They facilitated this. They were all part of this. And, you know, no one said stop. No one said stop. I don't understand it. I know this business, this cycling game, it sucks you in and it just screws up your sense of what's right and wrong. I don't know. It's crazy. In '87, the tour came through Vizille, and I was absolutely going to make sure that I was in the front group, riding up this hill, going through what was now my adopted home. So I was in the front line with Fignon and Roach, who was in the yellow jersey, in the front line coming up here through Laffrey, absolutely busting a gut so that my fiancée could be proud of me. And here I was looking for her, and no sign of her anywhere.
I was there.
You tell me you were there.
I was there.
So no sign of her anywhere.
He didn't see me, and I didn't see him.
It was incredible that Stephen took the yellow jersey the day before. So that was his first day ever, I think, in the yellow jersey. And given how far we went back, it was pretty special to be with him when he had the yellow jersey.
He was incredibly generous to me, Stephen, during my time as a professional. He was world champion in 1987 and Tour de France winner. We got married in October and he came to our wedding, and it caused a huge kerfuffle that he was coming. He was the biggest sports star in Ireland at that stage, and it was a big deal for him to make the effort to come over. He gave me an envelope after the reception, just as we were going back to our hotel, and we opened the envelope and it was £1,000 in cash in this envelope. And it was more money than I'd ever seen before, and we were absolutely thrilled, the two of us. Anne still says it was the highlight of our night. If you read Rough Ride, the reverence I felt for him, the affection I felt for him, the admiration I had for him, I think that comes through.
You see, I can only take one of two implications from the book, Paul, and either you're suggesting that Stephen and Sean are taking drugs like the rest of them, or else, if they're not, then they are even more supermen than even we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Which one?
I knew you'd ask me that.
I knew you knew I'd ask you that.
I wrote the book. I didn't mention Sean Kelly or Stephen Roach, anything to do with...
in connection with drugs?
No.
You did not?
No, I didn't.
No, you did not.
Because it's not important. That's not what the book is about. The book is about that I was faced with this choice. It's not important whether Sean Kelly or Stephen Roach takes drugs. That's not important.
But you say in the book that the whole point is important, that there is this conspiracy of silence entered into by the cyclists, the directors sportifs, the managers, the sponsors, the advertisers, the journalists.
Roach may sue over Late. He'd obviously been upset by the fact that I wouldn't go on the Late Show and tell Gabor he wasn't doping, or had never doped. He was upset by the fact that I didn't do that.
I was 27 years of age. Here's this guy who I kind of felt was a brother, a best friend. We'd done so much together, and here he was casting a shadow over my victories.
Well, L'Équipe then ran this half-page piece on bestseller Quai d'Orange, a piece by Jean-Michel Rouet. Basically, Jean-Michel, this fantastic journalist, has opened with Roach, inviting him to the room and telling him how I've betrayed Roach and all of my French teammates. Because it was never published in French and they never had a chance to read it in full. All they got was this half-page piece. They knew Roach and myself were like that. And when they heard him saying, Kimmy just betrayed us, that was enough. They didn't want to read anymore. Didn't have to read anymore. So I came back to the tour that year, and sure enough, they interviewed Jerry Claverola, my great friend at RMO. And he says, you know, yeah, he's betrayed us. And so that was the damage that Stephen did to me here, you know. I was absolutely furious. Absolutely furious. I was spitting blood.
Absolutely furious.
French journalists had heard about the book, then they were asking me, this is terrible, what's this guy going on about? It hurt me, so I was, like I say, shooting from the hip.
I believe the impression he has given is unfair because it has left Sean Kelly and myself as the top Irish riders carrying the can as far as allegations of drug use are concerned. I learned things from Paul's book that I never knew. And that is just an insult to everybody's intelligence. You know, I turned pro with several of Roach's teammates. I turned pro working with his former director sportif, Bernard Thévenet. All of the people I encountered that taught me about the drug culture in the sport were all former associates of his. How is it that I knew about this and he didn't, you know?
You believe what you want. You know, I'm not going to say I didn't, I did, or I could have, I didn't. No. You know, for me, it's not even I wouldn't get into a conversation about it. Because no matter what I said, either the good Lord was standing over me saying he's telling the truth, nobody would believe you.
You feel it's worth it?
Well, do I feel it's worth it? Let me tell you why I feel it's worth it. Okay? When you shot him that, the deaths, the amount of people that died after Rough Ride was published, right? When the substances being abused went from amphetamines and hormones to EPO, you know? Now, you tell me if it's worth it. If we could have prevented those deaths, if they'd stepped up to the plate back then, instead of doing what they did and trying to pretend the sport didn't have a drug problem, you know, what implications would that have had for those kids who died? I believe it would have had made a big difference. So that's why I believe it's worth it. Now you go back and ask them if they believe the same thing.
We're coming now into Bourg-d'Oisans, which is the town at the bottom of Alpe d'Huez. This is their Mecca, the Wembley Stadium, the new camp of cycling is the Alpe d'Huez. It's a natural amphitheatre, an arena if you want, and just a place to be. The amount of people, and you look up and you'll see these lions going. This is fucking mental. It's going to take about 4 hours for us to get to the top. Come on, get out of the fucking way. Fucking asshole. Prick. Yeah, that was definitely the hardest part of the week so far, anyway.
With just 3 stages to go, Froome is in total control. The ultimate prize is all but his.
It's the 100th edition of the Tour de France. No Frenchman has won a stage. There's no Frenchman in the likelihood of winning the race either. Still continuing up the climb to a crazed crowd here on Alpe d'Huez is TJ Van Garderen being chased by Christophe Riblon of France. It looks as though the French are again being denied a stage win, this time by an American.
Il opère la jonction, le coureur de l'équipage Edozan Amaga. 2 km de l'arrivée, accélération. Quand même de Christophe Riblon qui s'est surpassé dans la deuxième ascension de l'Alpe d'Huez pour remporter la plus belle victoire de sa carrière 2 ans après le succès de Pierre Rolland ici à l'Alpe d'Huez et 3 ans après son succès à Estrois-Domaine.
Quelle est belle cette victoire de Christophe Riblon qui s'impose donc ici à l'Alpe d'Huez. Pierre Riblon est derrière une arrivée pour une image visuelle.
Merci.
Well, that was a genuinely great stage, very exciting. No Frenchman had won a stage yet, and it wasn't looked like they were going to. It just wouldn't be right if they went through a whole tour without winning a stage.
Arrivée du maillot jaune, Christopher Froome dans le quart visio.
Hi Chris, there was an interesting report today in L'Équipe, dossier Froome. What was your motivation of releasing that data from the 18 climbs, and what do you hope people will take away from that?
It wasn't, just so it's clear, it wasn't a decision that I took. The team owns all that data, and the team made the decision to release that data to the relevant analysts. but I'm really happy to hear their findings and to hear they're basically backing us up to say that these performances are very good, strong, clean sporting performances. I know what I'm doing is right, and I'm extremely proud of what I've done to get here, so no one can take that away from me.
Fin de la conférence de presse, merci.
I just find it interesting that as fulsome people have been of him in their praise, very few have used the word great about his performances. So I think a lot of people are standing back now and just wondering.
At this point in time, the sport needs firm skeptics. I don't know what the truth is with Froome, whether he's clean or he's not or so on. My hope and belief is that he is. But either way, whether he's not or whether he is, the fact that Paul is drilling that home has a positive aspect to it. If he's not clean, well, then it's exposing truth and so on and so forth. If it's as I hope and that he is clean, it's teaching Chris, Sky, the sport in general, that, listen, we have a history. We have to deal with that history, and it's going to be hard to deal with that history.
Never getting complacent, that's the key. And cycling in the past has kind of taught, we've done it now, we're there. But I don't think the public are easily going to allow cycling to forget and to get complacent. Of course, new products will come on the market. But when you're saying to riders, yes, new products will come on the market that we won't know about, but eventually we'll find out about them, and we will retrospectively test your samples. And remember, Armstrong lost his titles 7 years after he won his last one. So even though you might get away with it today, no guarantee you'll get away with it forever.
Paul's got to look on the bright side once in a while. I mean, for his own good. I hope that when the surety of the fact that the race is clean and the winner is clean is there for him, that he won't overlook that because of the past.
There's a saying, we'll always have Paris. I think it was meant for lovers or said about lovers, but it also has a particular resonance or meaning for professional cyclists. Because this is a day that, for 170 odd of the pack that are still there in the tour, is going to mean a lot to them. Both today, but down the road when they look back on it. And in 1986, I caught sight of the Eiffel Tower just as we were coming into Paris at the end of the 1986 Tour de France, and it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen and one of the happiest days of my life. It feels very special already coming back here, and I think I'm actually going to really enjoy the day. See you next year. I don't know about that now. Hold on. Have you signed up for next year? You think we'll be back here again? No way. It's the 100th Tour de France, and to mark the occasion, the organisers have invited riders who've completed the tour to sit together in a special grandstand on the Champs-Élysées. The number of living people who finished the tour is actually quite small, and I feel very proud to be part of that. It's going to mean a lot to me. I just wish my dad was here, because he was here in 1986 when I crossed the line. But I know he'd be watching on TV.
And I want so much, as a cycling fan, to believe that things have changed and that the performances are real. I love cycling. I've been riding a bike since I was 2 years of age. It's been part of my life since I was a kid. People have always misunderstood, the stance I've taken against doping and misrepresented it as an anti-cycling, as if I was somehow against cycling. That's been very convenient for them to do, and I won't let them do it, because it's not true. I've got a lot of joy from the tour this year.
Listen, thanks a million for everything, and enjoy your celebration.
I'm off to drink some champagne.
I had that in mind, actually, for some reason. I kind of had that picture in my head. Paul, thanks a million.
Thanks, Adrian. Bye.
Okay, Mr.
It's a party. Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Passez. Also, je suis journaliste depuis longtemps maintenant. Et toi? Where this 20 years ago, just after rough ride. This is my most prized possession. This is what they give you when you finish the Tour de France. A little medal, not very spectacular, but would have pride of place in anything I've ever won from the game. It means I achieved something I dreamt about as a kid, you know. Not totally, because I never dreamt of finishing it as a kid. I dreamt of winning it. But it's enough, you know, given how hard it was to actually get there, how hard it was to make the start of it. It's enough that I did get there and that I did actually get through it. That's what makes it so special.
Is taking on the yellow, takes on the green jersey of Eric van der Orden. So Le Monde is looking now to finish this tour on the highest possible note.
Only the best 200 professionals get to ride a race. So just to get to that level, you've got to be pretty good. The general public don't really appreciate that. They say, well, where did you finish? You know, 132nd doesn't actually register as a great result for them. But I know, to me, it's everything, you know.
It's been harder than I ever expected, but this last week has been unbelievable. I go on the bike every day, not knowing if I could finish or not.
Will you do it again next year?
Certainly. It's crazy, but I will.
Paul, many congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest. He gained his hard man's licence in the Tour of France. 2 years later, he just gave up. Couldn't take it anymore, forget it, resigned, came back. Mind you, another avenue open to him because he became the Journalist of the Year last year. And now he's written the story of his life in a book called A Rough Ride. You have spat in the soup. A vulgar French expression means you spilled the beans, you've let the cat out of the bag, you've given the game away, you've a turncoat. And you talk about the drugs in the cycling scene.
Right.
And the implication is...
Stephen Roach. Kelly was a giant. He was the world #1 for 5 years in a row from 1984 to 1989 and is now a leading commentator on the sport. Stephen was also world class. The only Irishman ever to win the Tour de France.
It was Phil Anderson of Van Poppel who shared it, and 2 arms in the air for Stephen Roach says it all. This has been a great finish to an unbelievable Tour de France.
I met Stephen when I was 13. We used to go out every Sunday together, or spend the weekends youth hustling. It was great, a lovely, innocent time. Stephen was someone I'd idolised from the day I started riding. And in my last year as a pro, we were teammates and roommates again. And it was like we were back youth hustling. We were very close. Fortunately, when Rough Ride came out and Stephen reacted in the way that he did about it, I removed him from the Wall of Fame. I stuck him in the corner here, and he's buried under a pile of shit, which is apt in some ways, given what happened to our relationship. I just stuck it there for the time being. I think he's still kind of in a purgatory. I'm not sure whether he'll ascend to the wall or be sent to hell for forever. I don't know. It's a long time since I've spoken to Stephen. So that's kind of sad, you know. That's kind of sad.
Many times it's difficult for former athletes to be critical of a sport they love, of people that they perhaps were involved with professionally in that sport. Paul came at it from the outsiders or the Mavericks perspective. He had already written.
99% of them just resented the book coming out. And they were saying I was somebody that didn't make the grade, I was moaning about it. And that probably annoyed me more than anything. Me personally, I wouldn't have gone down that road myself. Anything for an easy life.
Don't believe that. Don't believe that at all. I didn't lick it off the ground. My dad was a terrific amateur racer and was the national champion, Irish champion in the year I was born. We're 4 boys, I was the eldest, and you know, from the moment I could walk I was watching my dad race, and from the moment I could talk it was the one thing I told him I wanted to do. I wanted to be a bike racer. So much of my drive and my focus, my ambition to be a pro, was wanting to please my father. That's where a lot of it came from, just wanting to show Dad, you know, I can do this, I want to please you.
Paul was born perfect in an imperfect world.
That is hilarious.
In this group are 3 Irish riders, Stephen Roach, Sean Kelly, and a great ride being done too by Paul Kimmage. So
it used to be the Fab Four, the 4 Irish professional riders of the late 80s. Martin Early, myself, Sean Kelly and Steve.
That most of them are at it. Most of the time.
I'm not concerned about implications. That's not why I wrote the book. Why I wrote the book was not to say this guy's taking drugs or this guy's taking drugs. It's to highlight the problems that there are.
Would have been the easiest thing in the world for me, just to say, okay, journalists now, forget all that, get on with it now. Don't write any book, don't tell any stories. But I had a duty, because I love the sport, I had a duty. This is wrong, that you cannot compete at this sport without arriving at that crossroads that I arrived at. That's what it was all about. It was about what the authorities needed to do to address it. That was the reason I did it. And naively, I thought, wow, you're going to write this and people are going to be saying, well done, mate. You've done the sport a great service. That's how naive I was then. I had absolutely no idea it would be as bad as it was, you know. You're like dog shite on someone's foot. And that was the sense of being dog shite, you know. It was the unvarnished truth about professional cycling. I guess the difficulty for a lot of my teammates was that they were still competing at the time. They hadn't retired like I had, and they were getting asked questions they hadn't been asked before. So there were implications for my friends that maybe even I hadn't thought about before I'd written it.
How can Paul be doing this? Like, you don't write books about what you've seen on the inside of our sport. This is the first time anybody's done this kind of book about the sport. I felt like he was kind of blowing out of context his experience with cheating, that because he did it, everyone was doing it.
He was viewed as a guy who, sold out cycling for his own benefit. That's how he was viewed in the world of cycling. He was viewed as a skeptic that could never be convinced otherwise. I still view that in cycling he's not welcomed warmly.
The reaction of the sport was to say, you know what, he's just a small rider. He never won anything. Why should we care about him? And it was a tremendous work for cycling, on cycling's behalf. And the sad part is that cycling rejected it. When if they had embraced it, looked at it, acted upon it, there would have been no Lance Armstrong. There would have been no the Armstrong years.
What was hardest of all was listening to this shit about him being a failed cyclist, because this was the first thing that was thrown on him. He's bitter. He's bitter about cycling. I remember him when he was younger, he had a very vibrant sense of humour. I don't think he has a very vibrant sense of humour anymore. He's certainly quite a serious individual now.
I don't think I actually told you that was what I was doing today until it was done.
No, you didn't know.
No. You were reading it the first time yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which wouldn't have been too easy. Was it? I don't know.
I didn't, it's just the way it was your story and that's the way it was and I accepted her.
Yeah.
But most of the cycling fraternity over here didn't accept it. I'd say probably